Stakeholder.
In gambling, an independent party with whom each of those who make a wager deposits the money or counters wager.
A person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business.
In emergency management, any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival and recovery of a given community. You.
Welcome to Stakeholder Prepping.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you are the stakeholder in your own survival. We are your hosts. My name is Chris.
And I'm AC. And today, we're going to do a deep dive into the psychology of collapse. Like, what happens to the human mind and to groups under extreme pressure? And by the end of this episode, you'll kind of have this 4-question screener based on the Myers-Briggs personality test. That's kind of how we're going to base this. So think of this as the background check for your apocalyptic group of friends.
Yeah, and can you imagine if somebody would have asked that to, like, Negan from The Walking Dead?
Oh, 100%. And remember, in The Walking Dead, like, they had their questions, right? It was the how many people have you killed, how many of them have you killed, and why type thing. So they actually had their own test. And you saw in the later seasons where they would meet someone and, like Michonne would say, did you ask him the questions?
Yep.
Like they had their own version of that.
That's what we're looking at. And you can kind of custom tailor this, but it's important to know what your questions are going to be before you have to ask them. Because if you let that fox into the henhouse, it's all over already before you even get started on the apocalypse. So this is going to be kind of an important, but kind of a psychological episode.
Yeah, and I think this piggybacks onto last week's episode pretty well, where we were talking about, how do you sort of feel out people if they are preppers? Because I said I can't do the pocket knife check, right? If you've got a pocket knife, then I can kind of assume that you are more prepared than people without a pocket knife. And we talked about those kinds of questions. Like if you're just meeting someone not in the apocalypse and you just say, hey, what do you do when the power goes out? Or have you changed a tire in that vehicle you have? So we talked about that a little last week, but now we're taking that one step further into that is the societal collapse. You are assembling this group, or you've got people in mind, and it is just, who do I let in? Like you said, it's these simple things you can do to kind of figure out what personality traits are good to have around and what personality traits are maybe less desirable.
Precisely, because surviving the end of the world is not just about beans, bullets, and Band-Aids. I mean, that's good to have, but
Right.
It's about people.
It's about people. That's right.
Yeah, it's about the ones you trust, the ones that you're stuck with, and the ones who show up when everything's already gone to hell. And this is kind of our insight into how do you tell who's who when everybody looks like cannon fodder.
That's actually, yeah, exactly. So let's start with something simple. This is kind of fun. This is also sort of dangerous, but it's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is Abraham Maslow was a American psychiatrist or I don't know the difference between psychiatrist and I mean, I know one can prescribe drugs, but when we talk about these people, I actually don't know which is which. But anyway, he was a psych type dude, and Abraham Maslow came up with this idea that everyone has this hierarchy of basic needs, if you will. It's not just this straight linear, here are my needs. I need a place to sleep and a place to poop and a place to eat. It's like this hierarchy of psychological needs. So if you picture a pyramid, if you will, and you've got kind of these building blocks. So the base layer is sort of this basic psychological need. And then you go up from there into the pointy part of the pyramid where, all the really crazy psychological stuff happens.
Yeah. And so let's break down those 5 levels. 'Cause the first one, like you said, that's the physiological needs. That's water, food, sleep, Those are in unfortunately in a collapse, in a disaster, in an emergency management scenario where you are your own stakeholder, those are the first ones to go. You lose out on food, you lose out on water, you definitely lose out on sleep, and that makes you cranky, and the rest of the pyramid starts to kind of crumble as soon as you get cranky. So your physiological needs, the food, water, sleep, a place to safely poop, things like that, that's your base human Homo sapien need. And then when we go up into level 2, that's kind of your physical protection and safety. That's your shelter, your health. That's where most preppers live.
Yeah, that's the shelter, guns, and fire. Maybe that's the if that's those are the people that's that level 2 person. That's all I need is guns in the apocalypse, because if I have guns, I can come take all the other stuff I need from you, and that's a dangerous mindset. Even if that person is on your side, that's a super dangerous mindset. And you're right, that's kind of that level 2. That's where most preppers kind of live, in this shelter, protection, health. And I would say that's the not really looking into the future. That's kind of like that right now prepper. You're not thinking about anything beyond that. I have my guns, I'm protected, I'm healthy right now, and I'm going to stay right here at this level 2. That's all I need.
I agree. And it is a very, very precarious place to put yourself if something does happen, because you don't have, if you are so focused on the shelter, the physical protection, guns, ammo, things like that, you are more likely to neglect or forget about prepping your level 1, your food, water, sleep, things like that. And when you do that, if you're neglecting one aspect, then everything else will also kind of fail alongside it. It's like you've said before, all ships rise together. Well, they all kind of sink together on the tide too. So if you're letting one go, the rest are going to suffer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think we get this from a lot of prepper media. A lot of the TV shows and the movies about prepping, they don't do a lot of really psychological deep dive on people. And, we never really see that side of people. It's always just yep, I've got my protection and my beans and my bullets, and that's all I need. And in the movies, those people, they turn out all right.
In reality, not so much.
Right, exactly. So then we're getting up to the pointy part of the pyramid. What's level 3?
Level 3 is your, it's written down as love and belonging, but really what it is, it's your family, your tribe, your romantic partner, your collection of people that you want to be with, your chosen family. And it's the interpersonal relationships that you have to deal with, whether you're wanting to or not. This may be, if you are more of a loner, this is how you interact with others that aren't part of your group. If you are part of a social circle or a prepping group or something to that effect, this is all those people that are in your compound that you're trading stories with day after day. You're cooking alongside them, you're cleaning alongside them, you are putting in the manual labor alongside them, making plans, whatever needs to be done. These are the people that you're dealing with. And then when we get up into level 4, this is where esteem and self-esteem come in. So your respect, your social standing, your achievements, however you want to look at that, it's how you see others viewing you is your esteem, level 4. And then level 5, this is where you've seen that meme of the skull, and it gets brighter and brighter and the
Yeah,
brain gets more active.
right. Yep.
Your self-actualization is your level 5, and that is your sense of purpose, your creativity. That's also where your morality lives. So it's very easy to see how something on level 1, if you are missing food or water or sleep, level 5 and your morality clauses, your self-held values could be in jeopardy if you're that hungry.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, that those building blocks, if they start to erode, then that top part of that pyramid can fall very quickly or it doesn't even exist. This is almost like Jenga, if you think about it, that you need those building blocks before you can get to that respect and that social standing and that self-actualization. You need those building blocks because, yeah, you're right. You can't paint your masterpiece when you're starving, if that makes sense. And I think that's something that a lot of preppers don't even think about. They stick in that level 2 and maybe get to that level 3 where you've got to have your tribe and your family. And this is something that's very interesting. We talked about this a little bit last week where we talked about the difference between your inner circle and your outer circle and the way you treat those people differently, especially in an SHTF event, even in daily life, just trying to conceal the fact that you're a prepper to like your coworkers, that's your outer circle. But in that apocalyptic scenario, your outer circle becomes your inner circle very quickly. Those people that you didn't have those deep interpersonal relationships with, they're either part of your group or they're not. And so when they become part of your group, then that does change that whole social dynamic. Now you're talking about all those people are kind of on the same level with you at that point.
I completely agree. And the moment disaster hits, society really does get knocked down a peg or two on the pyramid because, people at the top, people like college students with this vision board and a yoga mat in their little dorm room and whatnot. Yeah, they suddenly care more about clean water than enlightenment or going to school.
That's right. Yeah, you care more about that bottled water than you do about inner peace when shit hits the fan, don't you?
Very much so. And when people are stuck in that survival mode, they don't think long term. They don't think beyond what they can see right in front of them. And they act out of fear and emotion and that tribal instinct, protecting what's mine. It really does become a me versus you mentality as opposed to an us versus them or anything beyond that evolutionary wise.
Yeah, that's right. People do when you get hungry, man, things change a little bit. And I read a quote that said something along the lines of disasters don't turn people into monsters. They just reveal the monster they were hiding behind all of their politeness, if that makes sense.
That's a scary, like nightmare inducing one. So I love it.
It's nightmare fuel, but it's so incredibly true when you think about it. It's just true that, yeah, a person who is not hungry is just naturally a whole lot more polite than someone who's starving and they're looking at you and you've got food.
Speaking of which, I haven't had dinner yet, but that's neither here nor there. We actually have examples of people downgrading out of their pyramid from things like Katrina. How many people were violently attacked inside of shelters even because they said the wrong thing to the wrong person and it ended up in a brawl? Or look at the early days of COVID and all of the hoarding, the panic buying, the fights over masks and where to get them, who needed to wear them, people attacking others for wearing their mask incorrectly or not having one at all. And it's not because people are evil, but because those bottom layers of that pyramid, they felt threatened and they decided to defend it. And that's where we get a lot of that conflict in an apocalyptic scenario, is because people have not thought it through and aren't looking far enough forward to plan for it. And so they get caught off guard. And when people are animals, if you corner an injured animal in the wild, it's going to attack you. People do the same thing.
Yeah, and when you're talking about not just surviving, but now you're talking about surviving with others. So those hidden traits become this huge threat to your group. So let's talk about those. I want to talk about group dynamics, whether it's like a bug out crew or a neighborhood alliance, or it's just the 5 people in a cabin. The psychology of groups is what's going to make or break you in that kind of scenario. And it's just so crazy to think about this because we're talking about just this group dynamics and what happens inside this, group of people in an SHTF scenario. And we're not even talking about the external factors. We're not talking about the zombies breaking down the doors. And you can see just so many examples of this in movies as well that I think paint a great picture. If you remember in the beginning of 28 Weeks Later, where the guy was in the cabin with his wife and all their friends, or I don't even think they were friends. I think they found a cabin that was all boarded up and they got in with that group. And
Yep.
when the when the zombies or whatever you call them in the 28 stuff later genre, but when they broke in, he ran out on his wife. She ended up not dying. He assumed she did. When he finally got back together with their kids, he told the kids that he watched their mother die, but he just got out. I mean, think about those group dynamics, right? That we were all in it together until those things started breaking in on the door, and he left and he got in a boat and he took off.
Yep. And spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't watched it, but great movie. It really does demonstrate how somebody can absolutely shatter everything that they've built by one decision because they didn't think it through. And it's a heartbreaking reality, but you have to start to think things through if you're going to survive with any semblance of societal norm. Because groups really are fragile, and when you add in stress, take away food, you'll see just how quickly that community turns into conflict. And there are some things that you can kind of look at from either a corporate standpoint or making friends at the bar or however you interact with regular people. These are all things that you can kind of start to think about now for your group.
Right. That's a great way to put it. So, groups always follow a pattern. Even in chaos, groups follow this same pattern. So, there's formation, storming, norming, and performing or imploding. And that can go either way. But so let's break those down. I want to talk about that, like that formation stage. That's that early stage. Talk about that, Chris.
So this is where you're looking around, seeing who's around, who has what resources are available. This is kind of when you were in elementary school picking teams for kickball. Everyone lined up. You had your two captains that were randomly assigned, and then they got to pick their teams. They are doing a risk reward analysis while they're picking for kickball. And when we're looking at forming a team, we're doing the same thing, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's that formation or that forming. That's kind of the honeymoon period. And that's right, where you're all standing around going, who's got this gear and who's going to step up and start to lead and all these kinds of things. And that is that early stage of that group, that formation. And then you get into the storming, and that happens fast. This is conflict over leadership. This is decision making. This is who's eating too much, and that accelerates under stress all the time. So when you think about this, we are used to a hierarchy, whether it's your job or your family or other interpersonal organizations. But in an SHTF situation, you get really communist really quick. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying I'm pro communism. I'm saying that the word comes from commune, and that's what you've just formed. So it is kind of who can do what and who has what skills or gear or those kinds of things. And because of the way we're kind of programmed in society, then conflict happens very quickly over leadership when someone just isn't automatically appointed, or when not everybody in the group agrees or respects the person that just appoints themselves as leader. And there was a really good example of that in Walking Dead, and I wish I could remember the name of the guy, but it was that hilltop where Maggie went, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a terrible leader, but he was the guy who owned the home. Remember? Like it was Hilltop was his estate. And so he just sat there and drank whiskey and didn't work hard, and he'd never even killed a zombie. The guy was terrible, but he was sort of that self-appointed leader because it was his home. It was his homestead.
Exactly. And that does kind of flow into the next stage, which is the norming stage. This is the one that we see people starting to get together, assigning roles, really starting to gel and come together as a team. And this is a lot easier if you are entering into a team or a group that already has certain key roles, like the leader, picked out. And you can determine whether you approve that leadership or not. You can decide to be a part of the group or not. But when the team really starts to come together and gel and has assigned roles, that's where you start to get momentum building and start to be able to react and respond and rebuild after a disaster scenario. And then this one I'm going to let you take away, but the performing or exploding, performing or imploding, that one's always fun to watch.
Yeah, it was Gregory was the guy's name at Hilltop. It was Gregory. And then eventually Maggie just hung him. She, had a horse leave his ass and he died. But yeah, so then you get into the performing or the imploding, right? And the performing is actually kind of rare in this scenario. Just think about the scenario we just laid out for you. You've got this group that came together. You're trying to gel. You're trying to figure out who's got what job. And in this scenario, resources are likely dwindling. Some amount of resources. You're not making more bullets in SHTF, or you're not making more Red Bull, whatever it is. There's certain things that, regardless of how well you're doing, there are some resources that start to dwindle. And because of that, then that's where you get some of that implosion, because the performing part is a little rare. That is the dream. But when you perform, the team is going to function and that group is going to survive together. And generally speaking, man, when you just lay that scenario out, I don't think it's going to go down that way. It's really tough. And that's why you've got to carefully vet everyone and have, you just have to have those preconceived ideas and conversations about what everybody is going to contribute and what everybody's going to bring to the table. And if not, you're going to get to the imploding before you get to the performing.
That could not be better stated. You will implode before you perform. And I think one of the mainstream medias that best portrays all four steps repeatedly, the formation, storming, norming, performing, is actually Squid Games. So you've got 256 people or 456 people. I can't remember exactly how many it was, but you've got all of these people. You throw them into a room. They all kind of mill around and click with each other in smaller groups. And then you assign them a task, and there's leadership conflict. There's pressure to perform and who's going to take charge with the norming. And then it's kind of a forced performance or implosion scenario in Squid Games. But the thing that makes it so real is the game organizers are constantly changing that formation, storming, norming, and performing. They, as soon as one group wins or loses, they break it up into smaller groups. So you have to do it again, and then you have to do it again. And each time there's a new game, trying not to spoil everything, but you see these new groups that are forced into existence, and some of them perform, others absolutely collapse under their own weight. And it's a brilliant way to look at that, because stress compresses timelines. So what takes normally months to do in corporate America, it can happen in days. And, when your roof is leaking, you're out of antibiotics, you've got nowhere else to go or turn to, you have to rely on the others around you. How are you going to take that? Are you going to be the person who says, no, I'm taking charge because we ran out of this? Or are you going to be the person that says, all right, we failed at one, let's keep going and find a solution so it doesn't happen again?
Right. And you've got, generally speaking, in these groups, so every person falls into one of these 5 roles, and I'll list them out. And I think it's very possible that people fall into more than one of those roles. But here are the roles in a nutshell, boiled down in its most basic version we can explain is you have a leader, you have supporter, you have fixer, you have dissenter, and you have parasite. It's kind of those 5 roles. And in a crisis, every group's going to get them, and those roles get real very fast. So it's going to be pretty easy to figure out who's doing what. And the whole goal is to eliminate the dissenters or the parasites before you let them into the henhouse, like you said, Chris.
And to better define those roles, the leader is not always the loudest, but they are the one that others follow. When they say something needs to get done, others are inspired by that and actually try to get it done. The supporter, they're the person who is kind of the mediator. They will keep morale up, boost your own self-worth and integrity as much as they can. They're going to smooth over conflict and be that kind of go between, you know, tell Sarah I'm not talking to her. You walk over to Sarah. What? Christine says she's not talking to you. Well, tell Christine that I'm not talking to her. And that person, that's your supporter. Hopefully it doesn't get that bad, whoever Christine and Sarah are. Your fixer, that's kind of your handyman. They get the water running. They build the latrine. They are a problem solver. That's your engineer, your mechanic, your plumber, your electrician, your tradesman. That's critical to the group. And then the dissenter can be a good or a bad thing,
That's exactly right. Yeah.
depending on what they say.
We talked about, is it that they call it like the 10th man scenario or something, right? Is that what it's
Yep.
called? Yeah.
10th man.
So, right, where you've got, if everybody has one opinion, it's that last person's job to have a different opinion. It's that person's job. So they explore all options. You have to have kind of that devil's advocate. And that's kind of that is the good thing about having the dissenter, is having that devil's advocate on staff. This is, well, what if we don't do this? And I'll give you a real world example. Charlie talked about this in our combat trauma episode, where he said, you have to start thinking about rationing care. Like if you've got oxygen bottles or antibiotics or those kinds of things, then it's that dissenter's job to say, hey, we might not be able to keep this one person alive, but we could keep the rest of the group alive by making these decisions. So dissenters aren't always bad. It's good to have one. It's not good to have 90% of your group as a dissenter.
Yes. And the last one is the parasite. They are the one that consumes resources. They're constantly stirring up shit, creating drama. They avoid any type of responsibility or brush it off with excuses, or we all know this person. The tricky thing here is the parasite can also be any one of the others. You can be two of these things. You can be the leader and a parasite. You can be a supporter and a parasite, or a supporter and a dissenter. You can play devil's advocate, but when you start to play it too much, then you become that parasite and you're tearing the group apart more than you're actually helping it to succeed. That's where that line kind of gets drawn. And it's going to vary for every group, for every person. It's something you have to start to think about, though. And if you're going to be successful, you need to eliminate as much of the parasitic behavior as you can.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so let's talk about, that kind of brings us to the Myers-Briggs thing. If that makes sense to everybody, where we're talking about, you've got these 5 sort of roles, and like Chris said, you can be more than one. And every group can have more than one of those. Like, for example, I think you can have more than one leader, because it's not that top hierarchy, right? We're just talking about people that are leading others. In the in the Army, Chris, it's like you didn't just have one officer. There was more than one officer, and you might have more than one O2 or O3 around, and they just sort of they just took control of different aspects, right? And so it's that same kind of thing. You can have more than one leader in a group. Even in a small group, you can have more than one leader.
You can. And I think this is where kind of having that Myers-Briggs personality test, it really does become an invaluable tool. So, for our purposes, what is the Myers-Briggs personality test?
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it is a fast lens just to understand behavior under stress. And this really is more your jam, Chris, so I'll let you take it.
So, there are 4 categories with Myers-Briggs. Um, and if you've ever taken it, it's kind of a cool test. It is a little outdated, but it does form kind of the basis for a lot of current personality tests. And think of these 4 quadrants or sides. And if you just kind of think of a square with 4 boxes in it, you can weigh all of your different sides. But there's your introvert versus extrovert. Does that person recharge their batteries alone or with others around? Then you have your sensing versus your intuition. Are they a detail focused, detail oriented person, or are they a big picture, long range scope? Uh, then you've got your thinking versus feeling. Do they base their reactions in logic or emotion first? And then finally, your judging versus perceiving. Are they organized or do they just kind of go with the flow and adapt and overcome? And it has been criticized, but the Myers Briggs personality test does give us that fast and dirty shortcut to predicting behavior under stress. Because when you look at a stressful situation, just as examples, somebody who is an ISTJ, so introvert, sensing, thinking, and judging, they are extremely law abiding and dependable, but they are going to be more inflexible. They are great for having order, but they can push it too far and become kind of dictatorial. Uh, by contrast, you've got your ENTP, which is your extrovert, intuition, thinking, perceiving. Those people are going to be creative, resourceful, but rules don't really matter to them. They mean nothing. They can either be very brilliant or absolute chaos. Your ESFJ, that's your extrovert, sensing, feeling, judging. They want everyone to get along. Sometimes that comes at a cost. So you're going to get along whether you like it or not. You're going to spend the afternoon wearing the same t-shirt as your brother while he's wearing it. Right?
And we're obviously not saying to use this to plan a birthday party or something. We're saying in a collapse, it helps you predict how someone reacts when the system breaks. And it is down and dirty. It has been criticized a lot, and obviously there are criticisms, but like you said, this is kind of the down and dirty. Immediately, how can I decide who is going to take on what role? It's actually a fairly effective tool, and we'll put some visualizations up like on our blog, because yeah, when you look at this in a spectrum, if you haven't ever done this before, if you've never done this Myers-Briggs thing before, then this may all kind of be foreign to you. But when you look at it in a spectrum where you've kind of got these 4 different sliding scales, if you will, then it makes it very easy to visualize kind of who is going to do what. And we'll put some good visualizations up so you can understand that. I think there's some good ones out there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there are people that are not going to be suited for certain roles or are going to be better suited for different roles based on this. Like an INTP, they would be a great planner, uh, whether that's rationing or whether that's what to build next, things like that. But you put them in a firefight and they collapse; they're done. On the contrary, if you've got like an ISFP, they are super calm in a crisis. They're the one that's talking to you, bro, dude voice while you're in absolute chaos, but they're going to avoid confrontation unless they have to. When they have to, those are the ones that it's going to end in their favor.
Yeah, and this isn't gospel. It just gives us clues into people's personality. And I do like what you say about the firefight because you may have someone that shows up to your group and they are the ones with all the guns and the ammo and the battle rattle and the kit and the camo and the level 4 plates. And very easily, if you're armed with these tools, you can say, you know what? I realize you believe you're the guy who's going to stand up in a firefight, but I can tell immediately that you're not. And so there are times when you can use these tools, and having that predictability may help keep people alive. And it may give you a better idea of how to handle those kinds of people. Like, hey, thanks for showing up. And I really dig this AR-10 you brought along, but maybe you let me hang on to that.
And that's probably not something that they're going to be very happy with, but if it's critical for group health, then they need to understand that too. So let's run through a real quick exercise here.
Okay.
Let's say the collapse has already happened. Let's say we're 2 weeks in. You've got kind of your tight group, the people that you brought along with you. You're at your bug out site. It's you, your wife, dogs. It's your small tight knit community.
It's the inner circle.
Yeah.
The inner circle's there. Yep.
Then a stranger shows up at your gate or at your door or whatever you have for your bug out site. They've got their backpack, they're loaded up, they've got their rifle, they've got a story about how they got there. Maybe they've even got their family with them. The question is, do you let them in?
Yeah, and we saw this like in Homestead. Perfect example of that for people that didn't see the movie, but you had, people lining up outside the gate and without obvious skill sets. And again, I won't give away the movie, but some of those people outside the gate without skills that maybe you thought were needed ended up kind of saving the community because of these certain skill sets they did have. But we're used to asking about skills, right? We're, medical, security, water purification, but we don't often ask about mindset. We don't ask those psychological questions ever.
And this goes back to Dawn of the Dead with the Best Buy TV salesman ending up being the leader.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. God, I can't think that I should write that guy's name down because he's been in so much stuff. But you're exactly right. Where, yeah, everybody kind of assumed, what were you, some, you know, tactical badass before the collapse? Were you military, whatever? No, man, I just sold TVs at Best Buy.
And the mindset is what really put him into that position. So
Yeah, that's right.
we came up with kind of a sample of questions that you could ask. By all means, customize these to your own needs and your own scenarios in your head. But I think the first question is: in a crisis, do you tend to act immediately or gather information first? And this is going to tell you whether they're impulsive or reflective. This is going to be, how do you respond? What is your fight or flight reflex? Because action and violence of action and action bias, those are all great until it gets people killed.
Yeah, that's right. And I do like that it's very simple and it's not confrontational. It's just simply saying, it's digging into the psyche a little bit. And in a crisis, do you tend to act immediately or do you wait and gather information first? And that answer can give you just so much insight into what that person may do in a high stress environment.
And I think the next question, this one, when I was writing this question out, this one kind of struck me, but is it more important to be right or is it more important to be kind? And this one is really, it's geared towards the TF axis on the Myers-Briggs personality test. So this is going into the thinking versus feeling. But you need logic, but not at the cost of morale. So if we look at actually show called The Good Place is a great example of this. What set of doctrine do you take for your values? Are you completely utilitarian? Are you strictly Kantian? What What psychological model do you follow? Is it more important to be right or to be kind?
And there's certainly not a wrong answer there. It's just you better know which one you're inviting into the group, right? Because there isn't a wrong answer. You just need to know if that is going to be the person that is going to do the right thing or the kind thing in that high stress environment where you're going to need to take action immediately.
Yeah. Is this person going to let somebody else in to take resources against the downfall of the group?
Right. And so third question, I really like this one. And this is very philosophical, but if rules don't make sense anymore, is it okay to break them? And I think in that scenario, I would want to ask somebody for some examples. But, for example, if it's complete societal breakdown, are you going to go 55 in a 55-mile-an-hour zone? Or is murder okay now when you see anybody? There's a lot that's a huge question, but I really like that if rules don't make sense anymore, is it okay to break them? And there may be people that are pragmatic and go towards the laws, and that's I think why you didn't say if laws don't make sense. You said rules because some people may go maybe the morality route or the ethical route or the religious route with that question. And depending on how they answer it, it's really going to give you some insight into how they're going to act in a group.
It really does. And I think my answer to that question would be, well, it depends on how fast I'm trying to get there.
that's that's right. And gosh, if you put me on the spot, I don't know how I could answer these questions right now. I actually would have to think about that. But yeah, if rules don't make sense anymore, well, it depends on the rule. And I think that's where you would really have to get down in the weeds with whether we're talking about ethical or moral or just laws. Are we just talking about common law right now? And yeah, you could really get into somebody's psyche with that question. I really like that.
Yeah. And rules don't make sense. Yes, I am putting an ice cream in my back pocket in the state of Alabama. Weird law, but it does exist.
Oh yeah, I think I read something about like fighting squirrels in Kentucky or something was outlawed on Tuesdays. There's some weird laws. There are some
There are some
weird
very weird
There's
laws.
some weird laws on the books. I'll tell you, like in Portland, they legalized cocaine and then they outlawed the straw to do it with. That's kind of a weird law. Um, but that question also, you want to find out if that person is like a chaos type person, if they thrive in chaos, or if there's someone who's going to just lose their mind without that structure, because we're talking about a Teotihuacan or an SHTF event where there is going to be less structure, and you need to know whether people can function without that structure, whether they can just kind of hang out with their own moral code and not do anything crazy or stupid or violent.
Yeah, just because arson isn't illegal anymore doesn't mean it's not going to hurt somebody.
That's perfect example. Yeah, I just like fire.
I know you do.
Load somebody up with our Tinder cards.
Oh, there's something to talk about.
All right, so last question. You came up with 4. What's the 4th one?
This one is more of an ego check. So
Okay.
we've got kind of our baseline, but if someone challenges your idea in front of others, what is your gut reaction?
Ooh, I like that. That is the ego test. Like that's what you're asking someone is, can you take criticism? Or will you fracture the group when things get tough enough? That's ultimately what you're asking someone without asking it.
And yeah, are you going to follow guidelines and orders given by the leader, or are you going to be 100% of the time the dissenter?
Right? And people are naturally going to try to give you the right answer or the answer they think you want to hear. There's really not a wrong answer to any of these questions. So here's the trick. It's not about the answers. It's about how they answer. It's about people's tone. It's about people's body language. It's the deflection. And this kind of takes me to those behavior. What do they call, like, criminal behavior? I don't know what those people are called.
Profilers?
Like profilers? Yeah, I guess a profiler thing, right? Because you're not just looking for the answer. You're looking for the manner of the answer. You're looking for that tone and that body language, and being able to kind of profile that person as they're giving that answer, because they're going to want to give you what they think the right answer is to you.
Criminal behavior analyst.
Criminal behavior, and yeah, is that just from that? What's the show that we talked about with Mandy
Oh,
Patinkin?
not
Criminal Minds?
Criminal Minds. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Criminal Minds thing, right? So, yeah.
It was updated from profiler to criminal behavior analyst, just because profiler sounded too aggressive and like they weren't giving a fair shot.
Oh, I get that. Yeah, that makes sense. I actually I I sat in on a brief in the last couple of years, with someone who had a job doing, basically, it was like airport profiling. They'd walk through a certain international airport and try to just kind of profile people. And I don't know how well that works, but I think in those kinds of environments, that's where you've got people that work for the feds that are walking around trying to figure out who should and shouldn't get on an airplane. And I'd met somebody that was their job to kind of walk around an airport and figure out who should and shouldn't get on an airplane. And it was all about that profiling. It was just looking at people's body language and things like that to figure out who may be an issue. This was, very recently, post September 11th, and you understand why they did that. But yeah,
So
you
getting
really
paid
want
to
profile
people watch.
Getting paid to people watch. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Man, if I got paid every time I went to the mall and just sat and people watched, I'd have like 6 nickels. I don't go to the
Who goes
mall
to the
that often.
mall? You don't. Who goes to the mall? You don't go to the
Nobody
mall
goes to
anymore.
the mall
Nobody
after COVID.
Do they have malls anymore? Is that a thing? Do malls exist?
They do. A lot of them have closed. So if you are looking for a compound and you've got some extra cash laying around, there's nothing that says you couldn't put a giant ass garden on top of that mall roof.
Oh, and I mean, that is the Dawn of the Dead. That's the whole movie, right? Both movies, both the remake and the original Dawn of the Dead. Although in the original Dawn of the Dead, there was a gun store in the mall, so obviously
Yes.
a much better mall than the remake, where all they had was like a fake Starbucks.
Yeah, hopefully whatever mall you decide to try to crash and make your own has a gun store. Otherwise,
Ideally, yeah.
you're just sipping on lemon lattes until the zombies break down the door.
It's going to be like one of those cutlery stores. Everybody's just going to be armed with like a Swiss Army knife that has like 85 attachments. That's, all the malls. That's what I remember about the malls, is they all had that cutlery store. You could get like a broadsword or something.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure I hope those are still at malls.
I have a question for you based on this test. We've
Okay.
asked our questions, right?
Mhm.
So somebody's coming up to the door and you ask these questions, they answer. What do you do with them if the answer is no, you can't come in?
Man, see, that is a dilemma. That is a very ethical dilemma. And I think what you do with them probably would be determined by how you answered those questions.
And did you create a threat, or did you create a problem for a future time, or are they just going to take it and go along?
Right. Yeah,
So-
therein lies the problem.
Yeah, there's a lot that you kind of have to ask yourself too. And this is something where if somebody is trying to enter and come into your group, it's important that every person in your group, or everyone in the hierarchy of leadership, because depending on the size of your group, if it's 30 or 40 people, you may have distinct roles for certain people. But if everyone in your group, 5 to 6 people, gets along with this person, they're probably okay to bring in. But it's important to have everyone do their own assessment and maybe have different questions lined up independently so that everyone gets their own vibe from this person. And if they pass all 5 or 6 or 20 or however many vibe checks they need to, then they're allowed in. But if somebody's got the heebie-jeebies off of them, nope, we're gonna trust the person that's already part of the group.
Right, and it's not about passing or failing, it's about fitting. You can have a good person who is wrong for your group, who just doesn't fit the group, and that's you're right. That's why it's good to have, everybody kind of get their vibe, out of somebody. So how do we fix this, right? What's the solution? Because you asked a very good question, is what happens when the answer is no and you've got somebody standing at your door and maybe they've got a family, maybe they have a group. Well, the idea is build your group now before there is any kind of collapse. Ask those hard questions now. Run those drills, assign those roles. Watch for the ego and the loyalty and the fear and figure out who's going to fall into those personality traits and then have enough people now that if you do create that threat at your door, you have the ability to deal with it.
And having those rules set ahead of time is going to be a lifesaver for your own sanity. Because if you're trying to decide at that time whether or not to let somebody in, or on the converse, if somebody's already in and they get caught stealing, what is the punishment for that? Is it
Right.
exile? Are we beheading them? Are we cutting off a finger? What is the plan here? So you kind of have to think about the good of the group versus your own morality checkpoints and standards.
Yeah, having the plan now. So trying to test that crew, and we talked about this a little bit last week, right? Figuring out what are those little checks you do now to figure out, who's up for the task, because you do have those people in your life. I have them, Chris. I know you have them too. Those people that they aren't particularly close. You probably wouldn't consider them inner circle, but they always say, "Oh man, when things get bad, I'm coming to your house."
That's why no one knows where I live.
Right, but you've got to think about that. You got to think about that now. You've got maybe that guy that you hunt with, and he's a great shot, and he knows how to field dress a deer. But man, he gets weird when he drinks. All right, do we want that guy in the group? Now is the time to think about that. If your group doesn't have a medic, you've got to find a Charlie now, because that person's going to be in high demand when stuff goes south.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And Charlie, please come be on our team.
Yeah, can you come to our place, Charlie? We'll give you the rally point. So we're not trying to make you paranoid. We're just trying to make you more prepared, right? That's what this is all about. Ask the right questions now, build the group, and then when that stranger knocks, know what to ask before you open the door. And I think you did a really good job with these 4 questions. And then figure out as a group, what is the right answer? What's the answer you are looking for? And what are the answers that are huge red flags?
I completely agree, because you're going to hear more of those red flags and be able to properly assess them now than when you are under stress as well. And I guess to kind of recap here, we know that disasters trigger this psychological regression in humans. We know that, we've seen it case study after case study after case study. And your group dynamics are going to determine your long-term survival. You can try to lone wolf it, but again, you're going to die of some organ trail disease before you even get to your destination.
100%.
The Myers-Briggs personality test is a usable tool, but you kind of have to alter your questions and boil it down into a tactical stance. And then really, prepping is not just about gear. It's about gatekeeping your piece. It's about what skills can you bring to the table? What personality can you bring to the table? What do you have to offer that's not on the surface? And that's what these questions are really designed to get at, is I can see that, okay, you're a 5'10" white male with a baseball hat on and probably 3 days worth of scruff. Great. Where did you come from? Well, I just came from the basement next door. Okay, where were you before that? Like, you're trying to dig a little bit deeper, and you can ask very, very surface level questions and not get the answers that you're looking for, or you can change these questions and understand somebody's key personality traits before they even realize they're giving them to you.
Right. And this will actually be a very fun blog post for me to do, because that's what you're talking about here, right? You've got the Myers-Briggs, you've got this Maslow's hierarchy, and then you've got these 4 questions. This is pretty easy stuff. This is very simple. When you look at this, when I show you this visually, you're going to be, oh man, this is like a super easy way to just vet the heck out of somebody. And I can do that now. And then there's tools here to do that later, to do that when that person comes knocking on the door. So yeah, this will be very simple. I know we've talked for an hour right now, but this actually is very simple. None of this is scary. You don't need some advanced degree in psychology to make it through this. This is very easy. And when we do the blog post, I think it'll make a lot of sense. So make sure you go to the stakeholderprepping.com. We have a blog for every single episode, and I try to make that as simple and easy to understand as possible when I do the blog post. And we always do links. We'll provide external links to all this stuff. So this should be pretty cool when you see it visually.
I think so too. So final question here, and this is not in our outline that we both have, but if you wanted to practice these personality questions today, how would you go about it? Because I personally would run tabletop drills and have war games in the kitchen over coffee and Dr. Pepper or whatever, and just get everyone involved and throw curveballs at people just to see what they would respond with, because that's going to give me a better look at their personality. What would you do?
Right. Well, I think you can find online these Myers-Briggs tests. I think it's pretty cool to just ask people to take them. And here's something you can really do. If you're not trying to out yourself as a crazy prepper, then you can just, anybody that you're thinking about, you can just say, hey, will you take this Myers-Briggs personality test? Because I came up with this and I'd like to know what you are, because we work together, or you're my next door neighbor, or you deliver my mail, or whatever it is. It's not that weird of a thing. I'm taking a psychology course right now at the local community college, and I need to find 5 people to take this test for me. Would you mind?
That's one way to get it done. And I guess on the contrary to that, what do you do if they find out that it was all based on a lie?
Right. Yes. Our entire relationship was based on a lie. Yep. I'm that guy. Although, okay, yes. So in the apocalyptic scenario, you're right. My group was all based on a lie, but yours was based on like some preteen like sleepover with Christine and Sarah. So
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah. Picking 2 names out of a hat just burned me on that one. So
it would be funny though, like, yeah, down the road when if you have that sort of apocalyptic event and you've got your group and you assemble your A team, and they're like, is this why you asked me all those questions 4 years ago, you weirdo?
Yep. So be
Yes.
that weirdo.
Be the don't, yeah, exactly. Be the weirdo.
So I think that's about going to wrap us up for this one. But anything else before we close out, AC?
No, go to our website and check out the blog, and please subscribe to the blog. I put work into that, a little bit of work every Sunday. I sit down, eat my Cheerios, and do the blog. So at the bottom of our website, stakeholderprepping.com, all the way at the bottom, you can enter your email address, and we will not link spam you. You get exactly 1 email a week that is a link to our blog and has, the Spotify link to that particular episode.
Perfect. Well, we will see you back here next week. But until then, remember, you are your own stakeholder.